Here at Unsupervised Dork, we don't just 3D print things. We take them from plastic disappointment to museum-worthy artifacts. And today's experiment? The Holy Grail from the Last Crusade. Well, maybe not this one. He chose poorly. Anyways, we're going to be talking sanding, painting, and the entire process because, some people might just call it a cup, but those people are wrong and they are officially banned from my lab. And because if you're going to be drinking eternal life out of something, it better not look like it came off a budget filament spool. So grab your tools, ignore all the safety warnings, and let's finish this thing properly. Alrighty then, before I get into today's video, I do want to take a moment to go over the material list that I'm going to be using here for today's video. The link to the model can be found down below in the description, along with the list of materials that I'm using. Of course, one of the very first one of those materials is going to be my 3D printing material. I prefer to use Elegoo here myself. You'll find a link to that down in the description, along with a affiliate link to go along with that. And then, additionally, I always use an automotive 2-in-1 filler primer that is meant primarily for automotive stuff, as previously mentioned, but it does a fantastic job in filling in very fine layer lines, and on the upcoming model, it does really help smooth out the surfaces and make it have a nice smooth area to apply the upcoming paints and other materials. Speaking of the other paints, I'm going to be going with a classic, just standard apple barrel matte black. That's always going to be one of my base paints that I go to here. It's kind of a good standby here for most projects. Along with that, I am going to be using a little bit of this Tuscan red for some aging and accents to go along with that. This will be primarily applied with a little bit of airbrushing to go along with it. Then, one of my favorite materials that I have been working with over the last couple of years concerning 3D printing is a material called Rub and Buff. Now, this isn't necessarily a paint, but it is all in the same. This is a wax metallic finish, mostly used for things like making picture frames and other objects like that have a bit of an antique or patinaed finish to them. This one specifically is Silver Leaf. It's going to come into play here today. This one is Gold Leaf. And then I've also got an antique gold one as well. All of these can be found down in the description here with the link to all of the different materials that I'll be using. All of them are affiliate links, but it is worth looking into. If you've never used this stuff before, it's super fun to use. So let's talk about a fresh print that's basically right off of the bed. I have done a tiny bit of post-processing already when it comes down to this model. When it comes off the print bed, it usually has a pretty hard seam right along this particular edge right here. Usually I'll take a small jeweler's file, something that's just got a little bit of an edge to it, nothing that's too sharp or egregious. It doesn't need to be a gigantic file. But I will take down and grind that seam so that it's got a little bit more of a plush edge all the way down, leading it to the actual bottom of the cup here. And then on top of that, you might notice that this does not look like a pretty fresh print that's right off the bed, where in fact I've actually gone through already once and used a sanding sponge to go through and do my first layer of kind of rough sanding here on the object. And you can see where it's still got areas where you can see the layer lines. that are kind of being just shut down through this entire project. I did print this at a 0.16 millimeter layer height, so it is, pretty fine, and it does feel very smooth already after one pass with the sanding block. I am going to do one more here, and then I'm going to go ahead and apply my next go-to material, which is that automotive filler primer. So get one more sanding in, and then we'll go apply the filler primer. All right, that passes the nail test. You can barely feel the layer lines underneath your nail as you scratch back and forth. It's still going to have a little bit of a almost nails on a chalkboard like feel to it for a little bit here, but that's going to be taken care of when we use our next material. Now again, I'm going to be using this Rust-Oleum Automotive Primer. It is a 2-in-1 filler and sandable. It's meant to fill in imperfections and sand to a smooth finish. I love using this stuff. Some folks might recommend another brand, but this one's more readily accessible for me. And the one thing that I cannot stress enough when it comes down to using any kind of aerosol fillers, primers, sprays, paints, anything, always use them in a well-ventilated area, and even then, make sure that you are using some form of PPE. Make sure you've got a mask on because you do not want to be breathing this stuff. So let's go ahead, give this a coat, sand it back once, and then do a second coat, and I'll come back and show you what it looks like after coat 2 has been applied. All right. Coat 2 has been applied. It's still a little rough around the edges, but that's where this next round of sanding is going to come into play. This is also a situation where while sanding this material, you do want to have some form of PPE on and ensure that you're not breathing the dust fumes from this stuff because it's not going to be healthy for you. Make sure you are using PPE. Alright, now that the sanding part has been completed, let's go ahead and get a little bit of paint down on this and start using that Apple Barrel Black just as a base coat for a primer. Alright, now that this has had a chance to dry here for a little bit, notice that I wasn't exactly perfect with the black base coat, and that's totally fine because the vast majority of this is going to be covered up here by the rub and buff wax paint material that I'm going to be using here in a few moments. Now, first, I am going to work on the inside and then work to the outside and do the layering just like I would any other paint, but this again is a slightly different material. So instead of using a traditional brush, I'll be using this foam tipped swab to apply this material. First one I'm going to use is the gold leaf, and that'll be applied to the inside of the cup so that it has a bit more of a brighter tone to the inside. The outside will be layered with the antique gold, followed by a little bit of that silver leaf. and some airbrushing to give it a little bit of an aged texture kind of look. Now, notice when this material first comes out, it's very much like a paste. You could almost equivalent it to a silver toothpaste, or gold toothpaste in this particular circumstance, but it goes a long way with a very little bit. As you can see, I've barely put too much down here onto my little piece of paper towel here, and I'll put it onto the edge of my foam applicator here, and I'm going to grab just the inside and start, as the name may imply, rubbing this into that black paint. Alright, the initial application is done, but I do want to get it in there just a little bit more, so I'm going to put some just right on the tip of this piece of paper towel, and I'll wrap it around my finger. I'm just going to get it worked in there real good, because as the name may imply with this material, if you've let it dry and then you get a second coat on there and you give it a good buffing, you can get a pretty decent shine out of this material. Alright, yeah. It's already looking pretty good so far. It's got a nice sheen on it. You can catch it in just the right light. It has a nice kind of polished gold or copper look to it, depending on the angle. I like it. Now, let's move on to the outer layer, which is going to start first with the antique gold version of this material. Now, this has got a bit more of an orangish hue to it, or a coppery hue. And the reason I'm switching over to this is very intentional, because I wanted to have that old medieval style copper color to it, or an antique gold. As you can see here, it is a lot darker than the previous material, and you'll notice it a lot more as I start to apply it. Now I'm just going to flip it over to the other side of this foam applicator brush. That way I don't have to keep using new ones over and over again. And I tend to do that here with many of my projects. Alright, now I'm going to do the same thing that I did to the inside with the outside and use what's left here on the paper towel and just give a good rubbing around the outside here. Now, let's move on to the last bit of the rub and buff material, which is going to be used for silver leafing, and I'm going to put that around the outside to give it more of an aged, patinaed look, as if the metal's been kind of worn away and scratched a little bit here. And I'll just be using yet another one of these foam brushes from my little box of wonder and fun here. Now this round I am going to do something a little bit different than I was going for before, as I don't want to have too much of the silver on there. I want it just to be enough to make sure that some of this gold still shines through on the bottom. So I am just going to kind of gently flush and brush in random spots so that it's a little thicker in some spots than others. And that's just all I'm going to do there, because now I'm going to take this current stuff that's on the brush or on the paper towel, and I'm just going to work it all around. I think I can come back with a little bit more of that rose gold here. Just give it a gentle little wipe here and there, just to bring it back out a little bit more. That is almost the cup of a carpenter. Honestly, it's really close. I want to still add a little bit of this Tuscan red here and there, and you'll see exactly how I apply that along with a little bit of airbrush paint here in just a moment.
One eternity later.
Okay, now, depending on the project, I may use just straight acrylic paint. I might use airbrush paint. I might use rub and buff. Sometimes I use a mix of all three, and this is one of those cases. Right now, I'm going to mix up the tiniest bit of an airbrush adjacent paint. It's not entirely airbrush because I am going to be using a little bit of acrylic paint to go along with this. The tiniest dab of this Tuscan red, along with some crimson airbrush paint, and a whole lot of water. And just a little bit of coffee brown in there as well. Now, to mix this up, I typically use an eyedropper that would be used to drop this material into the airbrush as well. It's looking okay. I'm going to go back over one more time with a little bit more of the silver rub and buff. Now that, to me, looks like a cup that's been touched by time. Could it be better? Sure. Could I have used some other materials? Absolutely. But I think for the purposes of this, it's looking pretty good.